This is such a surreal moment. I think this is possibly my first Zoom event. So I wonder if I get like a badge or a sticker or something. I feel like it's, first up, it's great to be here with Joy Gharoro-Akpojotor.
Yeah, good.
Close?
Yeah.
Too bad. Thanks, Joy. That's made me feel incredibly comfortable. First up, just a very quick kind of rundown, just to say thank you to Network South West. Thank you, Alex. Thank you to Gary Thompson, who is the creative behind Cables and Cameras. And Cables and Cameras' objective has been to host and facilitate an evening that I would say, Gary would be clear on this, but I'd say for the last sort of 2-3 years it's been running. Usually happens in a community cinema, the Cube Cinema, and it's an event which is a way for Bristol students, film students, or any kind of creative student, black and brown young creatives to kind of meet up away from the course, as well as anyone that's interested locally in film and filmmaking. And it's a space where you can kind of hang out, catch up, network, screen short films, and on occasions we have guests and we're able to kind of have Q&As and sort of tap into the brains of creative folks and unpack some of the knowledge and influences that have helped them achieve their personal successes and have sort of kickstarted them on their journeys, their creative life journeys. Myself, I'm a film programmer and sort of film writery person with bits and bobs out there, but my background really is film programming. And I'm part of a local Bristol film collective called Come the Revolution, another great creative collective called Common Hand, and a kind of community broadcaster with the wonderful Ujima Radio, and kind of tied in with Film Hub Southwest and the wonderful Watershed and Cinema Rediscovered. So just, you know, lots of love to all of those guys. And that's enough of me talking. We want to talk to Joy. Joy, first off, could you tell us very briefly just a little bit about yourself? What you do and who you are, maybe possibly your most recent achievement.
What I do and who I am. So I produce and I write, but who am I? That's a hard one, isn't it? Who am I?
I'm really sorry, I have thrown you kind of into the deep end there.
No, I think I like to think of it as a creative, a storyteller. I like to, I think I'm an enabler when it comes to how we create more accessibility in the industry. I think I like to be able to help others to find space for themselves in the industry. As a producer, I like to bring in other voices, whether you are a director or whether you're a production designer, whether you're a costume designer, it doesn't matter who you are. I'm all about how can we create more accessibility? How can we create more space for all of us to exist? Because there is that space for all of us to exist and coexist in the industry. Do you want a brief history of who I am as well, like where I've come from?
What? Yeah, I mean, yes, please, because I want to. There's a couple of sort of more sort of intimate questions that are attached to that line of questioning. But yes, please, if you could, wonderful, Joy.
I sort of started off. I'm very much a self-starter sort of person. So I started off just making random things, very, very random music videos, short films. making mistakes, learning from it, hustling, finding ways to, like that's very much my mentality, which is interesting coming from that and then coming into the industry space, because I think uh, people aren't used to that at times. I think sometimes when you get a no, people are like, oh my God, they say no. What do I do now? Whereas I'm just a bit like, all right, we just go figure out something else, because when you've had to make your own things happen, you find many avenues to make it happen. So I think that's kind of like where I came from, and just using that to my advantage a lot in terms of not letting how people currently work be the way that I work. Like just bringing some of what I already did plus what's already happened.
Yeah, so I mean, that's fantastic. I mean, for me, it leads into a question around, like what does storytelling mean to you? Because writing is a part of your journey. I mean, where does this begin for you?
So I actually began as a writer in life. Like, I wrote my first book when I was 11. It was like a primary school, it was called The Vampire Busters. That was like my thing. But at that point I knew I wanted to tell stories. And then there was a period when I was in my A levels, I used to go like Orange Wednesdays. And I would just sit in the cinema all day, and I was just like, oh my God, I want to tell films. That's what I want to do. And I remember like I wrote a film with some friends in A level. Making films with your friends is just like, it's never really going to happen, is it? But it was my first time writing a script, and I was like, yeah, I really enjoy this. And then I went to uni, but I ended up doing film studies because I didn't realize that it wasn't a production-based course until I got in, and I was like, oh, this is all theoretical. Like, where's the making of stuff? But I'm actually quite grateful I did it. And because my mother's Nigerian, once I was in, she was like, okay, finish it in it. And I was like, but I don't want to do it. She's like, but who's paying for you to go anywhere else? Finish the course. So I ended up doing this course. And then I went off to do a master's because my brother helped me out to like get a master's done and creative writing. But during that period, I wanted to tell stories. Like I wanted to make films, but the kind of films I wanted to make, I couldn't find the people to make it or to actually, or who were making it. Like I wanted to like see myself on screen. I wanted to see like Black women, immigration, like what it means to be queer, all these different things, but I couldn't find it. So I figured I might as well start making it in a way that I could. Being a producer was more about being able to create spaces for those kind of stories that you couldn't see on screen. And that was kind of where that journey began. And it definitely overtook the writing. And which is why now I'm like, okay, I'm more of a storyteller as opposed to like, I'm a producer or a writer, I'm a creative. Because I think we forget that film is such a collaborative process that collectively it takes all these different people to create this one vision. So I feel like we're all storytellers. And that's kind of like the way I like to view myself now as a person.
Yeah. Two questions for me, pardon me, come out of that, which are, Joy, on your journey, is there anyone that you've encountered, whether that's like through friends, family, or educators, that maybe have like influenced you or helped to support or see your creativity on your journey?
So I think on my journey as a writer or as somebody who thought film was an option, there was I had a teacher in my first, when I was in Queen Mary, and he was like a production person. He was very much like a very blunt guy, like straight to the point. I remember like I gave him a script to read. He was like, love the title, hate the script. And I was like, what do you mean? Like, I put my soul. I remember like there was once he said to me, like, I'm being really hard on you because I feel like you really want to do this. And this is how the industry is. It's just like hard and it's harsh and it's blunt. You know, like when you're 19 and you're like, bro, calm down. Like, it's not that deep, in it. But what I did learn from him was, when I went to go to my master's, I wasn't taking things as personal because he kind of like helped me understand this whole idea of you're going into a space that whilst you want to be individual,
Yeah.
they don't always allow you to be individual. Like you almost have to fight for your individuality, whatever that is, right? So I think that definitely helped. And I also read, I only met her like a few weeks ago, which I'm still gassed about. But Christine Vachon, I remember reading her book and I was like, oh my God, this is everything I want to do. And then when I met her on this Zoom chat, I was like, for me, it was like her approach and still very indie, still very kind of like grassroots is definitely something that I have and still want to do in how I approach filmmaking. It's just all about how do we allow the director's voice or director's voice to be authentic, to be honest, to be present while still knowing that we are in the business of filmmaking. It is still a business ultimately, but how can we create a space where the creativity can bloom and be fruitful? But also we know that we can take this thing and go, make money over there because that's still what we do. And then I would say, who else did I meet? Probably Ben Roberts, who was my mentor in 2016. Just because that was like a transitional point for me. It was going from doing basically low to no budget films and coming to this space and kind of saying, okay, I want to make a film that's going to cost me £1 million. I don't know where that money is coming from. How do I find that money? What does that money look like? What do you do with that money? Just understanding how the industry worked. And he was just very instrumental in that in terms of just creating a space for me to learn and to ask questions and to, be very open. And that's definitely something that helped me a lot in how I move forward as well.
So with that in mind, Joy, what would you say are the nuts and bolts of being a producer? Because I'm like an old git, and even at this stage, I don't think I certainly couldn't tell anyone. I mean, I could point out producers in the history of cinema, etc., but what does it mean to you? How have you kind of embodied that role and made it your own? Like to a layman, what would you say? Like, I'm a producer.
Yeah,
What is that?
everyone has their own definition, right? I'm a producer, but I think of myself as a people person. I am just the person on set who talks to people, innit? I talk to financiers, I talk to directors, I talk to writers, I talk to distributors, I talk to everyone. That's my job. And that's how I view it for me. It's obviously you are the person who you're almost like a project manager, a creative project manager. You are the one that makes everything happen. You find everything and you allow the director to have the vision, which is why I say I'm also an enabler, because I enable that person to be able to come in and create this thing that they want to see on screen to tell their story. But I think for me, at the core of that, in order to have that, which is why working the way I was working before was all about how did you communicate with people? How could you allow people to come into a space, and although you weren't paying them a lot of money, they still felt heard and they still felt seen, and they still felt like, I'm going to work with you again because I just like you as a person. Because, when there is no money, they really have to like you because they aren't going to come back again. Similar thing with how do you hustle kit from the same people over and over again, especially when you have no money? How do you get food? How do you get all these different things come from just having really good relationships. And I think as a producer, that's the one thing you have to understand is how to, I don't want to like give people what they want, but how do you allow people to be seen so that they are willing to help you?
That is an art form in itself, Joy. In all honesty, I mean, like, I'm trying to avoid the cliche of plate spinning, but it feels to me as if you've got to be like a really personable, someone that can multitask and kind of take the pressure of that. Does that ever become easy?
No, the more money, the more problems. Like it's never.
dispel the myths, right? Because to me, that just sounds like every time like an incredibly epic challenge on every production.
Yeah, but you know, I like people, so I like talking to people. I like, you know, I'm not one of those producers who goes on sets and like stomps around. Like I don't like I've always been somebody who people never know I'm the producer anyway. I don't know if that's a good thing or a bad thing, but unless you're working in production, like the amount of times I've heard people go, I had no idea what the producer, you know, you were just over there keeping quiet. I was like, oh, God. Like it's just for me, it's about creating a space for because also I think you can't panic on set. And I think collectively it's easier for you to solve problems. And I think, you know, that whole thing of multitasking, obviously you delegate, but at the same time when there's a problem, you have to allow space for people to come to you with solutions because you can't know everything. Nobody knows everything. It's a myth. So, and every problem is figure outable. It just depends on whether you want to it just depends on what solution are you most comfortable with, right? So my thing is always about having the right team of people around you, allowing space for them to be able to come and give you solutions, so you don't have to feel like you're carrying all these things. I mean, ultimately, when it comes down to it, you are the one that has to figure out what is the best solution for that particular problem. But I think knowing that you don't have to have the solutions is also kind of very freeing and create space for you to just, you know, think. And you know, Christine Vachon in our chat, she said this really amazing thing that I think everyone was like, oh my God, that's so true. Like, you know, you have crisis, you have a problem, you have a crisis, and you have a catastrophe. A crisis is somebody's been hurt. Everything else is a problem. A catastrophe is when somebody dies, and that's the furthest you don't want to get to. But if nobody's been hurt, then you just have a problem. So you can fix
a problem to solve.
Yeah. So it also kind of allows you to manage how you view what's happening around you and how you carry all these different things and how you multitask and how you hold space with the people. Because you also have to learn to trust the people who are your head of department. You have to learn how to like, you know that they too can solve a problem in their department because that's their job. But obviously if they cannot do it and it then comes to you, people around you in your production team will also have solutions. So I think that's kind of, you know, it's about how do you, you know, work with everyone else around you.
It also strikes me, and back to what I was saying earlier about that whole thing of like, I'm not so sure many people could really tell you what being a producer is unless you are one. So like the thing that strikes me the most is that it's a truly experiential role. It's kind of you've got to kind of it's all based on experience and learning curve and just getting involved. With that, bearing that in mind, and you don't have to if you don't want to, but could you give us two examples? One kind of not necessarily horror story because you were talking about the kind of scale of from catastrophe to, but a possible horror story and a real breakthrough moment where things land and you just think, oh, this is just, it's starting to happen, you know.
I mean, horror stories, I mean, I've had many when I was like starting out. I mean, one I always use is when, well, it's two I use, but one of them is we shot a film. We, you know, I hustled, got the money, got the kit. Like, it was like, I found a way to make it happen in it. And, you know, got a director, I was producing it, everything. We shot this over like a day in a flat that we rented out. And the DOP had the hard drive. And then, you know, like about a week later, I was, oh, can I have the hard drive? So, you know, obviously I want to go start the edit in it. And he was like, oh no, I gave that out to somebody else. I was like, okay, but is my footage on there? Like, no, it's gone. But like, and he was like, but it's your job to have backups. And I was like I was devastated because I had to tell the actors, the director, everyone, because directors are, okay, where's the footage? Let's start editing. I had to go back and be like, yeah. So we have no footage. We have nothing. that was hard. That was super like, that's difficult to tell people because, you know, then you just feel like I am literally a failure in that point. But those are the experiences that I'm grateful for because that's when you really, really learn. Because like I at that point didn't know about backups. So now I have like 3 or 4 backups wherever I'm doing. So I'm like, just in case the backup fails, there's a backup. So we just have, I'm just like backup ready. Um, so I think we've had those situations. You know, on White Collar Black, it was a hard shoot just because, you know, we shot 4 weeks in Senegal, 1 week in London, but we shot that on a like shooting budget of like 35K. So like we're sending people. Senegal is like 5-6 hours away. You go to France and then bang, 4 hours you're in Senegal, isn't it? We're sending people round the world because we only have like £200 per flight in it. So that 6 hour journey suddenly becomes like 18 hours. It's ridiculous. But when you're out there, like, you know, we definitely had problems in terms of just like also just transferring money across as well and how long that takes. And then also just locations as well. But again, people are amazing in the sense of like, I had a really good production manager who was just very savvy and very kind of like knowing how to equally like just be very on the ground sort of person, very kind of guerrilla style, which I think sometimes you need. I think sometimes you need to think outside of the box a lot, just to make things happen. So I think they're lessons I've learned, 100%.
Can we briefly talk about Blue Story and how that came about and what the experience was of working on that feature?
So that had to happen. So Damien, who was the other producer on that, it was the quickest I've ever jumped in a job in my life. By the way, Damien sends me an email. He's like, "Hi, my name's Damien. Website. I've got a story. I've got this script, this project. If you're interested, let me know." At first, I was like, "Who is this man?" Just like one line email. I was so confused. And I clicked on his website, and I was like, "Oh." And then I emailed him back. We had a chat that evening. He sent me the script, and I'd seen Shower Story 1 and 2. I think that was the weekend Shower Story 3 was dropping as well. So read the script, saw Shower Story 3. Then me and Damien met on Tuesday. And I kid you not, like, so we're having this conversation. I'm like, right, okay, David, I'm jumping on board. Yeah. He had already drafted out emails with my name attached because he was like, in his mind, is like, you're going to say yes. So as soon as I said yes, he just started like clicking send to like, to basically like all the financiers in a way of saying, me and Joy are doing this thing together. Are you interested? He just went out to everyone. And I was like, wow, I love that confidence, isn't it? So anyway, so then I met Ratman, and then we started going out to all these meetings with BBC, I don't know, like Lionsgate, Sony, Paramount, everyone, to kind of see who was going to be our home. I mean, that was a very, very quick turnaround because, you know, films take longer than that film took. But I think everyone was kind of keen to, because Shower Story just come out. They wanted that to come out roughly around the same time the following year. Originally, it was going to be in January this year. We were going to release. But I think as we were going towards production, they were all like, actually, let's just make it come out this year, innit? Why not? So that was like, meant no space for mistakes. So we were just like, everything had to be really on schedule.
I think that's what it's so great to hear you talk about the experience, because I think the main thing is I'm hoping that people will see just the rapidity of how that happens and how sort of, I mean, just as you said, there's hardly much time to breathe. So you've got to be really kind of hit the floor running.
There was no time. And, you know, halfway through shooting, we had to move from South London to North London because we had issues with locations. So you haven't got space to think and figure out what that means, and that affects your budget. And then, in an ideal world, people would have time to go do a reshoot for different things, in the edit, but we had no time for that. So we had to be creative in the edit. We had to be creative in how we edited, how we put things together to the story, creative in how we used his music, how we used his raps, how we told the story with his raps. To be honest with you, we only delivered the film like a week before the premiere, like the complete film, because we had other issues in it, which normally we would have time to fix, but it was a madness. So I think a week before we were still like changing things, and I was like, this film is gonna come out premiere next week, yeah? Okay, here we are. So it was a very, because people, I think normally you have like a longer edit period. Normally you have time to reshoot. Normally you might still be doing post before your first festival or whatever. Yeah, there was no time for any of that. So it was a very intense process that I have never done in my, I've done it in the sense of working in very micro low budget. That's as intense as it can get. But I think on such a long scale, bigger scale, but also there are more things at stake. Like there's more money at stake. So there's pressure to like, we have to deliver a film, which is technically on an indie budget with a studio. So it needs to look like it could be a studio film, but we didn't have money to make a studio film in it. So it was a very interesting experience.
But it does look like a studio film. But what I love is that you're able to kind of blow the cobwebs of the kind of mystery, because I think so many people have like a really romantic notion of, and get to the point where I'm able to work on a studio, like one of the old school Hollywood 5 studios, and it's going to be, and everything by that stage, it will be kind of plain sailing, and it's not, is it, ever?
It's not plain sailing. It's like, it's just a different way of working. I think we're very kind of, we're in the UK, we're very kind of, we're very filmmaker focused in the sense of, we want to shape the story, ensure that we have the right, crew. I mean, the financiers are very involved in that process of approving your crew, or at least your HODs. Studios are just kind of like, here's the money, give us a film, innit? And the film just needs to be good. They're just like, cool, like the script, deliver the film, it needs to bang, and that is that basically.
We've got some questions coming in, but before I jump into questions, just literally a handful of questions, and hopefully these will be sort of relatively quick fire. But this is the one I don't want you to be quick fire about, because for me, I feel like it's the most important question, and I'm excited to ask you about it, because I think historically, this is, to get to that point where you're able to create your own production company, and it's really becomes about the things that you champion and believe in and are passionate about the most. I love that on the website, it's a really kind of uplifting mission statement of focusing on Black, queer, and female-led work. It's like, and that isn't to sound cheesy. Even when I say it, I feel like I want to cry, because getting to 40, to see such a thing, to read such a thing, is just magnificent and an incredible moment. So I'd love to ask you, Joy, about how, why, and what might be coming up.
How, why? I mean, it took me a while to kind of figure out what it was that I was really passionate about. Even though I had an idea of what I wanted to do, but I did this course called Filmonomics, which is about how helping producers to be sustainable, but also helping you to figure out who you were and what your things were, right? And that was about in 2016, I did the course, 4 years ago. And I think for me at that point, I was really questioning, what is it for me that makes me want to go out and make films and makes me interested in storytelling. And it goes back to what I'm saying when I was younger, is that thing of trying to find myself on screen. And that was really where that all began. and now where I'm at, it's really about expanding all those stories. Because, like, like you were saying, Beyond Plain Sight is like a black horror. Like, we have black horrors. Like, there's not enough of those. We have queer horrors. We have female-led. We have all in every genre. You can be black, queer, and female-led. Like, there's no reason why not. And I think not just you. I think from the UK perspective, but also very like in a very diasporic way, we haven't really investigated these stories properly. Like, we haven't really told them in a way that I feel it deserves. And we haven't really pushed the boundary on the kind of stories we can tell, especially in the UK. I think, Black stories are very urban in how they're presented cinematically. And, part of what I'm doing with my slate now, especially with the Vision Award, is, pushing that a bit more. So we have a film set in the 1960s, Windrush, but it's not about Windrush. It's about this black woman named Marlene who wants to be a ballet dancer, but there are no black ballet dancers in 1960s London. And it's about her journey to kind of finding what that means for her. It's about identity. It's about where do you place yourself. It's sort of set between this very like the shebeens and like the underground world of like illegal parties in the Caribbean society, but then you also have these like bohemian parties in a very sort of white Soho, because those are the two worlds you kind of goes between. And for me, it's like that's just like something we haven't seen on screen and a story we haven't really told before, and also female led in this particular way. And and it's based on the writer's mother. So so it's like it happened. Why are we telling that story?
Really personal story as well.
It's personal, and so like I've got stories like that. I've also got like a brom-com, which is called Mandem in Miami. It's just a bunch of Mandem who go on holiday in it. Like, it's a bit I find it funny, but it's a bit like our version of The Hangover, but a bunch of Mandem causing chaos, because it's that thing of you usually see those sort of guys in urban films, but actually they are hilarious. So
I'm hoping this is answering. There's an anonymous attendee who's asked that question. How do you choose your projects and what do you look for? So I'm hoping some of that question is answered in some of those pitches.
Yeah, it's about how can we be inclusive and diverse within ourselves and our own stories, and how do we create space for otherness as well. So you have Mandem in Miami, but at the same time I've got like a UK Goonies, but at the same time I've got a story set in like the 1800s about this Nigerian soldier who falls in love with this Nigerian girl who is the Queen's protege, also based on true story. But that's like a love story with Black people at a time that we don't really see.
So there's diasporic conversations and storytelling. There's genre, history, all of these different things. I mean, my thing's Black horror. I want to kind of like diasporically unpack some of that stuff.
Yeah.
So yeah, I mean, it's so reassuring to hear that, and to hear that your production company is excited about kind of pushing the parameters of what storytelling is, and always looking for that space to kind of champion and platform different approaches.
Yeah.
To seeing us on screen.
Yeah, because there's so many facets of us that why do we have to limit ourselves to a particular viewpoint? Like, we have my experience and your experience are two different experiences, and they're both valid. And there are other people who share facets of my experience similar as yours. And so for me, it all comes down to creating stories that allows for all of these things to exist, that allows for you. I mean, that's what Blue Story did, I think, ultimately, is that people went to the cinema and they were like, I saw myself.
Yes.
And they went again, and they went again, and they went again, because they wanted to see themselves on the big screen. It's like, you want to tell people that they matter and their experience matters and who they are matters, but actually, like, you too can be a superhero if you want to be a superhero. Like, it's like there isn't just one particular kind of superheroes. Like, we can all be superheroes, so to speak.
Yeah, representation is still important.
Yeah.
really, really important now, more so than ever. You know, I was just thinking about Ashley Clark's piece in Sight and Sound, which is great. That kind of travels back, you know, through kind of UK political filmmaking, you know, and here we are trying to break through in a different way with fiction and narrative, and so I think the time really feels as if it's about sort of pushing forward in lots of different directions. Two last questions, and then there's some great questions from the audience, and we've got enough time to do that. My last two questions, because I can imagine Gary is watching this, just going, Adam, ask Joy that question. So Gary's question would be around, well, really kind of what we were just talking about, kind of diaspora and regional conversations, because I'm always blown away by just the sheer volume of incredible things that are taking place in London. And a bit like what we were saying earlier, you know, like today, from this afternoon and all the way through this evening, there are so many incredible online workshops, skill set meetings, all kinds of different things going on. I think it's just advice around, it's kind of back to that kind of like each one teach one vibe, which is how do we turn on young black and brown people to the sector, to film production, TV production, filmmaking, storytelling, and what kind of ways, what kind of paths can we choose to sort of help to try to facilitate that? I loved what we were talking about earlier when you were saying about you know, where the costs are in educative things, and where what we should invest in whilst we're trying to do these things, and what should be relatively cost-free. I would love to sort of ask your thoughts on that.
I mean, I think, you know,
questions.
Yeah, costs are, like I'm saying, for me, it's all about giving young people equipment. It can be cheap equipment. It hasn't got to be like Alexas. I mean, I'm talking about Canons, you know, 5D or whatever. You know, these days you can literally make something on an iPhone, like, you know, if so possible. So I think it's about I think equipment is the most expensive thing, because, you know, if you give a group of young people kit for like a week, 5 days, whatever it is, and see what they can create, I think it would be amazing. And I think, you know, like we're at a time where a lot of people are happy to give their time for free, or at least for cheap, because it is about creating accessibility. It is about how do we get more people into the industry, also how do we get them interested, and also how do we allow them how can we get them to see that they're allowed in? It's like me and Kobe, we did a short like ages ago. It was like a corporate job we were doing together, but he was telling me a story of like, he got on a train, there were these two black boys sat in front of him, and they were just chatting, and they were talking about essentially like, you know, being on road and doing fraud. And he just like, I mean, because he knows the lingo, so he was a bit like, he looked at them and they looked at him like, oh, do you know what we're talking about? Like, yeah, I do. And they start chatting, and they're like they were like, oh, they want to be like they want to be actors. So he's like, all right, cool, why don't you just come to my set? I'm going to set now. Just come down, like, because they were, as opposed to you guys going to go do what you're doing on road, just come down and just see what's happening. So they were like, all right, cool, we're gonna come down. So they come with him to set. He's like, oh, you guys can be extras. But they looked around, they were like, wow, there's so many black people on here. Like, what do you mean we can actually be in this industry? He's like, yeah, of course you can, like there's space for you. But their reality is that they had never been shown that and didn't understand like what that access was. And you know what, the following day they came back, because they were like, just to be around other people who look like you, and you're on set and you're creating something, and there's a black man directing, there's a black guy who's a DOP, there's a black guy who's your first AD. It was like, what is going on? Literally just like blew your mind.
It's essential. Needs to happen. And, you know, and please say hello to Kobe for me, because I love Haircut with Robbie G, right? Legend.
Yeah, legend.
And House Girl as well, which I thought was
Thank
Superb.
you. Um,
Great.
but yeah, I think just giving people the equipment or the tools to use, right? And I think also asking people already in the industry just to give their time, because people will give their time and they will do it and they will be like, all right, cool, I'll give like a little hour. Because I think a lot of us are very much like, how do we help? What can we do? What can we do? And how do we reach people? Is where I'm at. Yeah.
Well, I mean, I love that you said that, because I talk to folks that are around my age that are still scared to. I sometimes get a bit shook in situations, and you just think, what are you doing? Just ask.
Oh,
What's the worst thing that can happen if you ask politely, or you show interest or passion in something? Like, that's got to be one of the most essential things, right? Just having that kind of, how does that work? I mean, how do
yeah.
you do it? Like, asking questions is a good thing.
And there are no bad questions, because I always tell people in film, nobody knows what they're doing. Like, I mean, obviously we have like a mechanic and a blueprint, but when you're a producer, no day is the same. Today something bad can happen. I don't know what to do. We've got to figure it out together, innit? Like, things are always shifting. Like, now that you've had COVID, things have like the landscape has shifted again. Like how we make films is shifting. The kind of films we're making are going to shift, because cinemas are only slowly reopening. Nobody really knows what that's going to mean the next year. So people are now thinking, how can we
There's
make?
already been a Zoom film. There's
Yeah,
already been a
exactly.
Zoom post.
There's been a Zoom film, so it's like people are
It's like,
making stuff differently now. You know?
yeah, amazing, amazing. And that's really the final question for me. And then we've got 10 minutes for questions. Some great questions coming through. COVID. What do we make of this situation? Because it's ground everything to a halt, and tentatively people are starting to try and um, work again in some sort of capacity. But I mean, I was just thinking, even from like, and I was just thinking about We Are Parable and their BFI fan study
Yeah.
that's just been published, and it's kind of, if those are the findings of audiences, I mean, like, how does that impact on the industry as well, for creatives, for cinematographers, for producers, for actors, I mean, this is the thing. What happens next to production, which is so much about being around other people and interacting and all the things that you've just, eloquently explained.
I think we figure out a new way of working, like a new normal. I think people are doing that now. Um, I think smaller things are easier to shoot, just because smaller crew, less people. The bigger stuff obviously is insurance based, but I think people are figuring out how to get around it, whether that is you put your cast in a bubble, or you put your crew in a bubble, whatever that means for the productions. But they are kind of trying to find ways in which, more regular testing. So for the cast, they're always being tested because they're not wearing masks, and most crew are wearing masks. They have to work close together. It's hot right now, but it's kind of what you have to do. One way in, one way out. All the food is pre-packed. More security to ensure people are going in particular ways. Like, kit is consistently being cleaned. I think it's just a new way of learning to work. I think from a more development point of view, I think people are changing the kind of stories they want to see and hear now, just because, I think certain stories would have worked pre-COVID and pre-Black Lives Matter, but now all of that's changed. So people are kind of like, what can we do about now? What can we say about the world now? So I feel we'll evolve with it, because we have no choice, and we'll learn. And I would say we'll keep on learning, because we're still learning about COVID. So
Yeah.
it's still going to affect how we all work.
Joy, last 10 minutes, we've got some questions here. Let's kind of quick fire our way through these questions. So an anonymous attendee has just asked, how do emerging writers or directors get your attention? What do you look for in people?
We have to get on just as people, to be honest with you. I'm very much a relationship based, I mean, I think producer direct relationship for me is about relationships. Because if I have to be with you for like the next 5 years, I need to. Like we are married at that point in time. So I think for me, obviously creatively, I'm looking for a voice. A voice isn't got to be like it's 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 hard to explain, but it's something. Everyone's work has something about themselves. Because that's what makes you who you are, right? So
Yes.
what is it about you that you are putting in your work that allows me to go, this is who you are? And it hasn't got to be like for instance with Kobe. His work is very gentle. His approach is extremely gentle when you are looking at whether it's house girl haircut, knots and crosses, or even the feature we're doing together. There's a certain element of tenderness he gives his characters that allows you as an audience to be able to sit with them, even at times when you feel like they are wrong, because he allows you a space to see their vulnerability, And so my thing is, what is it about you, whether you're a writer or director, that allows me to go, okay, I can see you. And if you know Kobe as a person, he's literally that guy. He's the sort of guy who will try to help everyone and anyone. And he's always the guy who will try to see the good in everyone. He's that guy. Even if you're a bad person, you try and find the good. And you see that in his work. So which is why I'm like, what is it about you that you're putting in your work,
Haircut floored me for that reason. It's got heart, and
it's got a lot of heart.
So, are you currently taking mentees under your wing who share your mantra to tell queer Black stories?
I am taking mentees, but there's only so much space. I currently have 3. I mean, I have 3. I mean, there's space for more, to be honest with you. But I'm also kind of like, I don't want to give people I think it's like I'm trying to do 1 meeting with each person a month. So let's just say I got space for 1 more because it's 4 weeks in the month, I guess. So I currently have 3 mentees, but yeah.
I mean, and that's part of that lovely feedback loop of giving back.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, I'm always like
the skills and knowledge that you've accumulated, you can.
Yeah, I mean, it's not always about it hasn't got to be a formal relationship. Like I'm always, depending on when you catch me, I'm always up for a conversation. It might take me like a month to get back to you, but that's just because if I'm busy, whatever. But I will always try and get back to people and be like, cool, let's just have a conversation and just talk because I think that's something I wish I had when I was coming in.
Okay, I'm going to jump to Joel's question just because he's been waiting for absolutely ages. His question is, how can cinematographers make things easier for producers during the pre-production process? What do producers look for in a cinematographer as well?
So for me as a producer, because I think for each producer it's different. My thing to make life easy is to know the economy of what we're doing. And by that I mean if the director wants to do a massive crane shot and I'm telling you we can't afford a crane, be economical. Because there are so many ways of being creative. Like you can do that shot without having a crane. That's my point. Like I think I'm looking for that creativity. How can you think outside of the box? Maybe that comes from my days of working outside of the industry, very kind of guerrilla style. Because like when we're shooting White Collar Black, there was a day the DOP called me, bless him, lovely guy. He was like, "So Joy, we want to shoot the scene outside of the back of a car, but we have no straps, but we've got a rope." I was like, I love your outside of the box thinking, but insurance does not cover you if you die. Because, but what I appreciated about him is that he was always somebody who he would, even if he didn't have it, he would find a way to do it. And I think that's one thing I look for because I think, in production, you can never give everything ever. So as a DOP, how creative can you be in your thinking of what we can deliver? There was a shot I worked at the end of last year, and there was like a shot that we really wanted to do, which was like It was like I don't know, like an over the top pan sort of vibe or tilt, but the actress moved forward and the camera has to go back all the way down, right? And we couldn't afford the actual kit we wanted because it would have been a remote head. But the DOP, she was amazing. She was like, no, it's cool. I got it. We had a dolly. She spoke to the grip. They figured something out. She stood on the edge of the bed. She couldn't see the monitor because of the way she was doing it, but the shot looked amazing. So it's all about how can you be creative in your thinking.
We have a couple of questions left. I'm going to go for Elizabeth's question here. It's a very good question. Joy, how does one scale up their productions from short films to feature? And are there any books or films that you might be able to recommend to watch or that you go back to and watch at the beginning of every project? I think we're almost close to...
Okay, I'll be really quick with this one. How do you scale up? I think it's just by building your experience. The more you do, the more experience you have, and the more people can trust you with their money. Because really, as a producer, I mean, if we're talking as a producer or as a director, it's really about what have you done. And I think, you know, it's a bit of a tricky one because there's some people who do like 3 shorts and they end up going to do a feature. But I think that also depends on how hard you push yourself creatively as well. And I think as a director, you have to have a producer who can push you creatively to allow you to get there. If you haven't got that, I think you have to do it yourself, which is harder. I think that means just doing more and practicing more and allowing your craft to grow, essentially. That's what it's about. This is all about like, because I think when people see you doing shorts that are great and bigger, they kind of go, okay, your next step is definitely a feature film. But that comes from the consistency, just doing. For me, I just kept on doing and doing and doing and doing. And then what's the other question? Is there any films I would recommend? Every project is different. I don't think there's one film I watch before I do, because it just depends on what it is. And I think, I mean, I always go back to reading The Killer Life by Christine Vachon, if anything, just for the fact to read that I am not the only person in this world who goes through madness. But I think it's just a really good book to kind of allow you to understand a little bit more about how crazy the industry is. So I think no matter what you're going through, just know somebody else has been through it already. That's the reality. And that's the good thing about that book, really.
Okay, so that's definitely worth looking into. Joy, final 2 questions. Easiest one first. How long was the shoot? Post-production time for Blue Story in the end?
The shoot was 4 weeks. Post-production, we had a 10-week edit, 10-week edit, and I think like a 5-week for everything else.
Crazy, absolutely crazy. That's just
mad. It's a bit mad, yeah.
Wow. I mean, I imagine there wasn't much sleep.
I mean, it was just a lot. And during that time, I was like, I'm gonna go do something else. Did that happen? No.
No. Final question. It's quite a sweet one actually, and I would imagine, and it's cheeky, in a positive way. Can you tell us a bit more about the feature with Kobe? What's the process been like compared to working together on shorts?
I mean, his haircut is made into a feature now, so we're just taking that story and making it longer, and and you know, he's writing the draft now. It's been an interesting journey because I think, you know, you go from doing shorts at about, you know, 15 minutes, bish bash bong, can tell your story, and I think people forget that features, you are literally creating human beings. Yes. You know, people are complex. We make bad decisions, even when we think they're good decisions. And, you know, we're also creating something entertaining. So you have all these different things to keep in your mind as you're writing a feature. And I think, you know, me and Kobe have a very good relationship in how we communicate. So sometimes where he's like, what are you talking about, Joy? Don't you get it? And I'm like, no, I don't. And like we might have like a discussion / argument for like 2 hours. But in the end, it's always about what are you trying to say? And I think that's the thing that we've really been trying to hold down, and is like, what is he trying to say with the story? And, you know, like I know what it is, because like, you know, because we've spoken about it so often in terms of like talking about being from a certain community and believing that you have certain choices, but understanding that you have more choices than what you're led to believe, and whether those are socioeconomic reasons or governmental policy reasons. He's trying to create a story around the community and show this boy who has lost a lot of things and is hurt and feels he has to do this particular thing because that is his only way out, but it isn't. And he learns that at the end, obviously. But why, again, Kobe has that tenderness. So I'm always pushing him to be like, okay, but where is that? Where is you in this work? Because it is hard to maintain that in a feature. It's hard to maintain that for like, for so long. But yeah, it's been an interesting process just trying to maintain all of that together.
Thank you, Joy, so much. I think that's all the questions. I think it's time to wrap up.
No worries.
It's a pleasure and an honour to meet you.
Thank
and
you.
I'm really looking forward to kind of following your journey and seeing what happens next.
Thank you. I enjoyed this.
Thank you, Joy.